For this section of the class, I will be working in detail, so you're free to work along if you'd like. We will be drawing a Mario parody called Angelo. He is a simple character drawn with rounded rectangles. Once drawn, we will animate him walking. If you would like to skip the drawing and go directly to animation, view the project suggestions at the end of this video and jump to the next lesson. I'll start with the head. Select the rectangle tool, set the color to any skin tone or type this color code. Next, I click and drag a nearly square rectangle. Before releasing the left mouse button, we can press and hold the down or up arrow keys to round the corners. Angelo only has a round chin at the bottom right. Normal shapes corners can't be modified easily, so we need to delete this and set the corners separately in the properties. To set roundedness on the fly, I will switch to the rectangle primitive tool. I click the rectangle tool and click again to select the rectangle primitive tool from the drop-down. With this tool, we can draw a rectangle and adjust the corner radius afterwards. I draw the head again as before. Then I switch to the selection tool. To adjust roundedness, we drag the controls on the selection box. To unlink the corners, I click the link icon in the rectangle options. Now each corner can be adjusted separately. Next, I draw the mustache. I switch to black and reset the corners. I'll draw this on the side first and move it in. As you can see, we can still adjust the roundedness on the fly using the up and down arrow keys. Before drawing the next part, I use the select tool to deselect and choose the primitive tool again. I set the color by clicking on the fill and moving the cursor outside the color picker to sample the skin color on the stage. Like before, I draw this part, switch to the select tool and adjust. I then click and drag a selection box over both pieces and drag them into place. To make precise adjustments, any selected shape or object can be moved using the arrow keys. Next, I draw the eyes directly on the face. We choose a white fill and draw. I unlink the corners and adjust. Similarly, I draw the black pupil. Notice that primitive shapes like drawing objects do not combine together, which means that we can overlap, resize, and reposition them. The eye and the pupil belong together. I click once to select the eye and shift-click on the pupil. I then choose Group in the Modify menu. Now both pieces stick together. We can ungroup at any time with the Break Apart function. I'll keep them grouped. Next, we duplicate the eye. Hold the Alt or Option key and drag out a duplicate. I select both eyes and position. Next, I'll draw the hair. Once again, I choose the primitive tool, reset the corners and draw. I position it and draw the bit on the top. Then draw the ear with the same skin color. Next I draw the hat. I select the primitive tool and then we can choose any blue or type the color code. Then the rim of the hat in a slightly darker blue. To finish it off, I'll create a big letter A. I select the type tool and set the family to Arial Rounders, the size to 35 and a white color. I single click to start and type a capital A. To move this, we can use the select tool. Lastly, I drag select all three parts and group them together as the hat. This can then be placed easily. We now have a full head and will group everything together. Moving on, we draw the body, starting the same way. For this, any red will do, or we type in this color code. The red part is Angelo's overalls, and his undershirt is going to show near the top right. Let's be clever here. Since the shirt is basically just a recolored part of the body, I'll modify this primitive. To do that, double-click it. This warning tells us that it will now be converted to a normal drawing object, which means we can't modify the corners anymore. That's okay. Double-click brought us into isolation mode. You can see that at the top left corner of the document. In this mode, you can't interact with anything other than the shape. As you can see in the drawing object, this is a regular shape. Here I'll select the normal rectangle tool and reset the corners. I set the fill to none and the stroke to black. From the outside, I'll draw the shape of the shirt and adjust the rounded corners with the keyboard. With normal shapes, if we make a mistake, we can just undo and try again. When I release the mouse button, the shapes combine, and I can select the intersecting part and recolor it. I then double-click on the line to select all of it and press delete. We exit isolation mode by clicking the back button next to the scene name. Now I'll draw the buttons. I disable the stroke and select a yellow. Then select Object Drawing Mode so that the shape can stack. Click and drag while holding Shift to draw a circle. Then I position. Then I'll drag out a duplicate. Double-click to edit. And I'll select the right half of it and press delete. We click back to exit isolation mode. To draw the arms, I'll go back to the primitive tool and draw a blue upper arm. I drag out a duplicate and select the Free Transform tool. I then move the mouse cursor to just outside the corner and drag to rotate. Hold down Shift to snap to 90 degrees. Finally, I draw a hand and position the pieces. And we group everything together. And then drag out a duplicate. Finally, the legs we do in much the same way. The shoe here needs some extra care. I put the leg together, and this time we don't group it. We can drag out a duplicate of all 3 parts to the left. Let's darken the right leg a bit. I select the 2 red pieces, click the fill, and select the color wheel. I then choose B for brightness and push it down a bit. I do the same for the shoe. The darker leg will be at the back. We select all the leg pieces and group. To put Angelo together, I need to adjust the stack order of the groups. To put the head above the body, select from the Modify menu, Arrange, and bring to front. The front arm goes above the head. Once again, Arrange and bring to front. For the back arm and the legs, use Send to Back. Now for the fun part. We will draw Angelo's legs in 8 different poses to use for animation in the next lesson. Take a look at this walk cycle. As you can see, there are 8 snapshots of legs in motion, and the last pose is identical to the first. Before we can animate, we need to draw them. I'll duplicate Angelo's legs and break apart to ungroup. We'll start with the back leg and bring it over to the left. Next, we select all 3 pieces of the back leg and choose Free Transform to rotate. Then select the foot and lower leg, rotate and position. For the front leg, we also select all 3 parts, but this time using Free Transform, move the pivot point, the white dot, up to the hip position. Then we can easily rotate around the pivot. I finalize at this point by grouping the pose. We then draw the other 7 poses in much the same way and line them up in order below the scene. Use Adobe Animate and draw 1 or more characters you want featured in your video. Like with Angelo, keep any moving parts such as heads, wheels, arms, legs or wings in separate groups before combining. It is not necessary to draw poses for a walk cycle if you do not intend a character to be walking. Export a JPEG of your character and post it to your project. To export a JPEG, go to the File menu and click on Export Image.